Welcome. We're at Legacy of Leaders, and I'm Dan Edelman with co-host John Heyman. And with us today are Jen Brown, the Executive Director of KIPP Schools, and Gary Chartrand, a local philanthropist who has been involved in many, many not-for-profits in the Jacksonville community. First of all, Jen, thank you for your service to our country. I know that you spent 8 years in service to our country and want to recognize that first.
Thank you.
You know, good to have the two of you together. I think, Gary, you've been such a leader in the community for education, and maybe you can talk about how you and your family really embraced education and supported it, and Jen can talk about how that has enhanced KIPP School.
Yeah, great. No, we got involved almost 20 years ago. I remember picking up the paper one day and reading that we had 22 F schools in the inner city, and I was getting towards the end of my career at Acosta, and we formed a family foundation, sat around the table, said, what do we want to invest in? There's so many things that need help, and we picked education. And we felt like, you know, we got to give our kids a better chance at life, and also increasing the choice of schools, that if you're going to an F school and there's no other choice for you, you get to go to an F school and don't get the education that you need. So that's when we got involved, and one of the first things that we got involved with was to bring Teach for America here. And that was, we had 100, at one time, 100 Teach for America folks in town. And then the second thing that we did was we wanted to bring in more choice, so we recruited KIPP to come here. And how many years now has KIPP been here? 12?
12 years.
12 years.
Yeah.
So they did not want to come to Florida, but we convinced them to come, and we were able to get a building donated over on McDuff, the old racetrack.
Yes.
I was very involved in that donation.
We raised like $9 million to retrofit it and started the school, and now, of course, great to have Jen as the leader over there with, what, 3,300 kids?
Just under 3,000. Just under 3,000 this year.
Under 3,000 children, so yeah, great.
Yeah.
And if you don't mind me asking, Gary, I've known you for a long time, Jen, not nearly as long, but you are not what I would call a soft philanthropist. You are a hard philanthropist in the proper sense of the word. It means you really go in there and make change happen. Yeah. And I thank you for that, because my heart is nonprofit. So tell us some of the other things that you've been involved with in the community, because it's a lot.
Yeah, well, thank you. I appreciate that. You know, I read a quote a long time ago by George Bernard Shaw that said, all progress is made by unreasonable people.
And you wrote a book.
I wrote a book about it.
Yes, you did.
Because reasonable people kind of just go along.
Yeah.
You know, they don't make change. So I think that quote is very true.
Yep.
But we've been involved not only in education, but mental health services, which is a big issue for us as well. We've invested heavily there. We've done a lot of health care as well. We've been big supporters of St. Vincent's Hospital with the Heart Center there. So, but mostly education and mental health and the underserved community.
Yeah.
We've tried to spend most of our time there.
Yeah.
And Jen, how has KIPP evolved and people like Gary really influenced what the outcomes have been?
Listening to Gary talk about he and his family's involvement in the community, I have the good fortune of running a network of schools where the intersection of their philanthropy comes to fruition. So I joined the KIPP team in 2015, and probably a year or two later, I remember sitting at a conference room table with Gary and with Jeff, and we talked to you all about the number of traumatic events that our children were experiencing, which led to a partnership with Children's Home Society, and we embedded mental health therapists in our schools. And that was before, now, because of the unfortunate tragedy with Marjorie Stoneman Douglas School, we now have mental health curricula and different security requirements in schools. But that was, we saw the importance of that back before any of that had transpired, and we're fortunate enough to be connected to the Chartrand family and say, listen, our kids can't even concentrate on the curriculum because they're coming to us having experienced these unimaginable traumatic events. And we need to be able to support their mental well-being as well as their academic well-being. So I think about that, and then just the involvement, both of you as board members. I kind of had what I would describe as the Avengers for a board during my early years as executive director. Seriously, a very powerful, influential, formidable board of directors that resulted in us being able to expand our footprint on the north and west sides of the city. We started out, of course, at the dog track and built a building immediately across the dog track, and now have 2 additional facilities. One on the north side at Gulf Air Boulevard in the amazing historic Brentwood community, and another one off of 103rd.
Yeah.
And what's been really interesting about the growth at our 103rd campus is now 13% of our student body there identify as Hispanic Latino.
Wow.
And we didn't see that coming.
Wow.
Yeah.
We didn't know that that was going to be the case, and it's beautiful, a very rich culture, and I think it's growing because of word of mouth from that particular community's families, and we're really excited about that. So the growth is exciting. None of that happens though without philanthropic support, time, talent, and treasure of folks in the community like Gary, like Dan, who say, I believe in this also.
And what's exciting is you decided that each of the campuses would not be in what would be called the economically blessed areas of our city. You went to the challenged areas and are making a massive positive difference. So thank you for your work.
I appreciate
and
that.
you were in a different function before you became the executive director. What did you do?
I came to KIPP as the chief academic officer.
Okay.
And so very heavily involved in the teaching and learning, and then had to switch gears to kind of broaden, I think, my skill set as opposed to being able to be in the classrooms and kind of drive the day-to-day academic work, having to learn more about the finances. I remember going to lunch with Dan and saying, tell me what I should be asking.
Here's some spreadsheets.
Accounting 101.
Yeah.
What should I be asking now that I'm in this role and I'm overseeing everything, right? How do I broaden that? How do I interact externally as the person who is the face of the organization? What is that like? So I've had some really good mentorship in the form of these two.
You didn't have to do things like this before,
I
did you?
I did not have to do this.
And Gary, you were part of the leadership that talked about the hard subject of choice.
Yes.
Of giving parents the choice of KIPP or a variety of other choices they could have educationally. You were on the State Board of Education. In fact, if I'm not mistaken, you were the chairman.
I was.
And you pushed that.
Did.
Do you still agree with that?
I do.
Okay.
Yeah, I kind of believe in a system of schools as opposed to a school system.
Oh, yeah.
And
Yes.
more pluralistic, if you will. It actually, as a democracy, the United States is an outlier. Most democracies around the world are very pluralistic with their education system. So the government funds education, they hold the schools accountable, but they don't necessarily run them.
Yeah.
And so I just have always believed that, the FTC is out there for a reason, and monopolies aren't good in anything. I think it breeds mediocrity, and so the idea of making it more pluralistic and more choice versus just the government schools that are out there.
Yeah.
And I also think that embracing that concept makes the public schools better.
Yes.
Because if kids are going to leave for another choice, they have to get better to keep their children.
Right.
And I think that's actually a healthy thing.
Competition allows all the boats to rise.
I agree. There is not a world where let me start by saying this. I think the supermajority of this country's children will likely be educated in traditional district schools.
Yep.
And I don't think that those traditional district schools reach their potential without choice options.
I agree with that.
I don't think that they reach their maximum potential.
Absolutely. This show is called Legacy of Leaders, and Dan, I hope you don't mind me asking both of them because you know both of them so well, being on the board of KIPP. Give some advice to those that are watching today on leadership in a nonprofit educational setting, in a business setting, educational setting, government setting. You've got a lot of stuff to share, plus your book. So just give some advice to those that are watching on leadership itself.
What would you say first?
Read my book.
Be unreasonable.
One thing I did tell Jen when she assumed the role is you're the CEO of the organization, and you don't necessarily have to have all the answers.
Yes.
And I said, a good CEO is a good listener. And it also getting other folks on your team engaged in some of the big issues that you have. Listen to what their recommendations are, especially the ones that are closest to the work. And then, but the CEO needs to know the right answer when they hear it. They don't need to have the answer, but they need to know the right answer when they hear it. And so, as I look at my business career and the mistakes, if you will, that we all make, I would say that the reason I made that mistake is I didn't get enough input. Yeah.
Oh, that's good.
So
That's great advice
always
for
good.
anybody in a
Yeah.
leadership
Yeah.
role. Jen?
I'm going to add to that. Leaders have to be teachable. You
Yeah.
don't come into the role knowing 100% of how to do the role. And those that teach you might come from unlikely places. You might not share the same background, and there's still value. There's some nuggets of wisdom that those folks can pass on to you. I think good, effective leaders are always teachable as people.
Yeah.
They're
Very good.
continuous learners.
Yeah, very good. How long have you been in the executive director role?
This is year 7.
Is it really?
It's 7.
I thought you were going to say 2 or 3. 7 already.
7 years.
That's fantastic, and I'm sure there's measurement. One of the things that I experienced in leadership is who is not leaving me.
Oh, that's
And
good.
if you are experiencing that, you are apparently a wonderful leader because people
am
don't leave KIPP.
experiencing
That's
that.
everything I hear. People don't leave KIPP,
I
so you're
am
doing a
experiencing
fabulous job.
That's great. Oh, I need to tuck that away too in my
Yeah.
quiver of leadership nuggets. Thank you.
Very cool.
You know, one of
Well,
the things that I think are important to build a high-performing organization, I've always said you need 3 things. You need great leadership, which Jen's providing there. You need high-quality human capital doing the work. And in this case, it's high-quality teachers with high-quality
right.
instruction doing the work. And then third, a culture that is a culture of high expectations to make sure that you don't have mediocrity exist in the organization. So if you get those 3 components right, great leadership, high-quality people, and a great culture, I think your chances of having a high-performing organization are much greater.
I agree. That's great.
Fantastic. You've used mediocrity twice, Gary. I've often called that the worst addiction in America. It's the addiction to mediocrity. So, well, ladies and gentlemen, this has been fascinating. I wish we could do this for hours because a conversation on education is usually number 1 in viewers' minds. So thank you, Gary, and thank you, Jen, for your work that you are both doing. And ladies and gentlemen, you all have a great day. Thank you.